Here yet, so I'm going to try to keep it brief so we can go on to the beer and there's barbecue, right? Okay, what will I talk about? It's a work in progress, as the title suggested. I'm a little more nervous than usually because it's really some unfinished stuff that I will be showing. You'll see here, it's not about 3D type, but the whole project is mostly a reason so that I could design an icon, and that this is the icon. I will be talking about an application that is a work in progress, that is not available yet and might take a while before it's going to be available. I reused a working title from an older project that went nowhere, so that's maybe a bad omen to now again start a project with that name. The name of the project is Type Machine. So it's an application called that, not typewriter, it's type machine. It's a little nod to matrix machine maybe, but actually the word type machine in Dutch means typewriter, which I thought was kind of nice, so it has a little Dutch touch in there. Anyway, what is it? It has an icon, that's the most important thing. There it is, nice icon with a super ellipse. I have been involved in the recent years with some projects where I very often had to look at existing fonts and kind of had to figure out how they were built or what they may have had to be merged into other things. Anyway, I had to inspect those fonts. What kind of OpenType features are in there? What are the character sets? And how to deal with that. And at some point, I ended up making charts like this with Drawbot a lot, like about Unicode, like a whole bunch of fonts, like which characters are available in which fonts, and what shall we do about that. To facilitate those kinds of things, at some point I made a little script, a helper script that still runs in a RoboFont, which I can open large fonts quickly. So for instance, I have here a folder of some relatively arbitrarily, I just downloaded the Noto Sans, or Serif CJK actually, large font. I downloaded a whole bunch of, is it still working? Ooh, a nice glitch here. So this is not the type machine that I'm going to show, but this is like a precursor a little bit. It's a list of all the glyphs in the font and their Unicode info, and there's some info like through which OpenType features those glyphs are accessible. It gives the Unicode names. Anyway, you see it's a pretty large font, but I can scroll through it really quickly. It opens within a few seconds. So I thought, this is really not a very great tool. Also, I was working on these charts that I showed before, and it would be nice to see more things like that live. And I realized it should be really nice in many cases to look at several fonts in parallel. So I have a bunch of fonts prepared. Wait, but which one to start? I forgot. Okay, let's do something. So, for instance, this fairly arbitrary Google font I will open. Well, actually, I will just start with one font to make it a little more exciting. So, this is the app, and nothing about this is final. But you see there's a column that shows a preview of the glyph. This is the actual glyph from the font that I can look at if I select. This is the character, so this is just a system font showing the character. If I scroll through it, you can kind of see what's in there. We get Unicode information, the glyph name of it. There's a whole bunch of additional Unicode stuff available. Things will be sortable, which I will show in a moment. And there's this magic stuff going on here that only becomes interesting once I do a little more. So for instance, if I take two fonts, Open Sans, let's see. And now I have two columns. So, my whole presentation, I will try to look at a time that I won't make it too long, because I tend to forget the time. What did I want to show? So I'm pretty much playing around with the tool which is unfinished. But look, I can select. This whole thing works a little bit like a spreadsheet. It's not literally completely a spreadsheet, but once you select a cell, I can use my arrow keys to navigate. And I can have like a multiple selection, scroll through, or I can also have a vertical selection and select like this. It's a bit about navigating through a design space, but I'm a little hesitant of that word. Well, if we see that word design space as a very broad term. The subject that I want to talk about next for a bit is, because I want to organize a collection of fonts that might be a family, but they could also be unrelated. For instance, here I opened 2 fonts from the same family, but I could, well, we have some more. I think the designer of this one is in the audience. But if I select 2 fonts that are totally unrelated, I can still get an idea like what's in there. And I see, for instance, here, well, these are not super interesting characters, but the first font here does not define these 2 characters. If I scroll through, let's see, here we start seeing differences. Left font supports these characters, other font doesn't. Right? So I get a pretty quick overview of what's in there and what might be different between 2 fonts. It's not a complete diffing system, but still to just get an impression like what's in there. So that is one of those things that so in a way this is at the moment a viewer application to. Okay, let me open this whole family at once. You see, those fonts are not super large, but it opens pretty much instantly. So opening a bunch of, were they OTFs or TTFs? I forgot. So we get this overview of, in columns of this family, and they're sorted in a certain way. First we have the Romans, and then we have the italics, and the weight increases. So this is about finding your way into a family or a larger project. In this case, it's relatively simple. There's italics, there's Romans, and there's 5 weights. But families get more complicated than that. And on the one hand, we can talk about axes, as in a variable font, like, hey, this is a weight axis. But very often we're talking about categories within a family that are not on a sliding scale. Like, okay, sure, you can make a slant axis, but very often you just have a Roman in your italic. Right? It's about organizing and sorting. So, like here we see we have the weights of the Romans together, but perhaps there's obviously it's about relationships across a family. Like very often you will see there's a folder that contains the Roman sources and a folder that contains the italic sources. Okay, it's nicely grouped, but it's in fact a font family is not a hierarchical system. It's a design space. It's a potentially multi-dimensional thing where you can place things. You can imagine that if you have a nice spatial imagination. But you need some ways to get a handle on that, get a grip on that. And I was looking for a word and something like axis, but axis suggests, well, this sliding scale, which is not necessarily what we're always needing, like in this case with an italic. So I was thinking, like, does the word category fit there? In the end, I Googled a bit in a thesaurus and found the word grouping or groupings. And that's it's not a group, the way I see it. So I started using this word for myself, a grouping. It's not a group, because a group is kind of a static, a fixed thing. This is your folder with stuff. But it's a way to group things. So it's a rule according to which we can make relationships. So I started having that word. I was kind of happy with it. If you're a native speaker and you think, hey, but I have this other word that fits much better, please come talk to me afterwards and I can get rid of the groupings. But I think it's a nice word for these kinds of relationships. So, for instance, this bit of UI at the top here, which is very much work in progress, shows some parameters, if you will, but they're not sliders. They're, in this case, I'm not even looking at a variable font, and if I scroll over this spreadsheet-like area, I will see highlighted where we are in this space. I mean, some things overlap. For instance, like the extra bold is actually the weight class of 800. It gets the weight class from the OTF or TTF. There's an italic angle, but there's an order to these columns, and I can actually rearrange those columns. Right now, we see the weights and then the same weights for the italic. But if I switch these 2 columns around, for instance, then they're sorted by, okay, now we have the matching Roman and italic together, because that's also what you may want to look at, like the relationship between your Roman and your italic. So there's not, what I'm looking for is relationships within a complex family that is not hierarchical. So in a way, yes, it's a multidimensional design space, so that's a useful way of looking at it. But yeah, there's design space is very often associated with interpolatable things. So yeah, we can look at all the zeros. So here you see this preview area. But yeah, how do we look at them? Maybe indeed we want the weights first, and maybe we even want to see the italics first. We can switch these around. Right, so the order is customizable. This system is not completely foolproof. Also depends right now a bit on the kinds of fonts that you put in there. But so yeah, we have this spreadsheet-like environment, and we can have selections that are possibly complex. Like I can, with command-click, for instance, make a selection like that. And what's happening here? Well, I can still go through it. So it's we can go both ways. Arrow keys is everything. I can extend the selection. Well, this is a super non-practical selection, but it's possible, and it makes for nice little interactive animations almost. So yeah, so look at these things. This is a fairly simple family. There's a search field here with which we can look for specific glyphs. For instance, right now it's only looking for glyph names. I have big plans to make it much more flexible to search for other things. For instance, this lists all the glyphs that have the word perk in it, well, or all the glyphs that contain the letter A, or maybe all the letters that contain the word X. But there's a little more. I added the functionality for some wildcards, not true regular expressions, but some wildcards that are familiar for command line users. Like, it's very small here. I just typed an asterisk behind the X, so now we're matching glyph names that start with X. But yeah, we can also, like, all the glyphs that start with a period. Well, that's luckily only the not def, as it should be. But likewise, we could do asterisk dot asterisk, and then we'll see, or all the glyphs that actually contain a period. So this would be, okay, there's many alts in this particular font. Maybe let's look for all the alt glyphs. So easily find and quickly find, based on glyph names, what we're looking at. So it's relatively simple. What do we want to show here? Well, there's also a little bit of typing that you can see, like this simple string set in all the fonts that we have open at this moment. Well, we could make that go a little further. Let's see if I will go to, well, I'm going to see what, I have a tab for kerning. It's even more work in progress. This font does not contain kerning. So now I know. Let's open something else. Does Lato have kerning? Let's find out. Does it have kerning? Takes a little while. It has kerning. It has lots of kerning. And it has multidimensional kerning. Like here is a kerning pair, but we can go through the numbers by weight, and we can have many of them. So let's zoom out here a little bit. So you can kind of inspect what kind of kerning is here, or select a whole. So we see the left glyph, right glyph, and quickly go through. And here we see some places where some combinations actually do not have a kerning pair. Maybe it's meant as 0, well, it will have the same effect as 0. So also here we can search for those things. So let's see all the glyphs that start with a T. So now we're more focused on current pairs with T. So you see this is quite a spreadsheet-ish environment. The idea is that you can then also numerically edit these things. There is some hint of that. It's not functional, it's not hooked up. But what is hooked up is that if I make a selection, and I copy that, and I go to numbers, I have a numbers file prepared here. Or Excel should probably work, I didn't test that. Paste, and there is my table, right from the actual font data in my spreadsheet, if I want that. Now we can do maybe some more math on it, or calculate things, or statistics. What is the average, current value, whatever. Back to the live display. Things are sortable, so by default, things are sorted in the current view from left and right glyphs. But for instance, if we sort by the right glyph, then things are pretty much grouped. Well, we're still in this selection here. Let me go back to select all. And do I have to sort again? So now everything is sorted according to the right glyph. So we can see what kerns with an A on the left-hand side. So it could be a useful thing to look at. Then, for instance, if we want to know in the light fonts, what is the smallest kern value used? Well, we can sort by kern value. And let me scroll to the top. Well, minus 300 is the lowest kern value in this particular, this is the hairline version of this font, and it's L asterisk. And, well, okay, if we go through a single thing, we can zoom in a little bit here. Oh, wait, too much. So you see slowly the current value increasing. Let me scroll further. So it's, the rest of the values sort of move along, but I sorted by one column specifically. Obviously, the things will keep on matching. Where's my scroll thing? So now I'm going to scroll to the end until there's no more kern pairs for this particular. There it is. So this is the end. The largest kern value is plus 100. Nice round numbers. I like that in kerning. Kerning should be multiples of 10, ideally. I recently was looking at some UFOs that actually used fractional kerning. I think it was a mistake that was caused by interpolation, but there you go. It's possible, at least at the source level. OTF, of course, it isn't. Anyway, spreadsheets. Spreadsheets is somehow suddenly everything, and we can go back to the characters. So we're looking at a whole family. Opening, so let me close this again. What were we looking at? Okay, we don't need numbers anymore. So this was Lato. We have, for instance, Ibm Plex is a really nice, this new open source family made by Bold Monday, really commissioned by IBM and completely open source, so it's ideal for demonstrations of this. But like the currently released family, the TrueType versions, there are 64 fonts. And let me see, I can select all and drop them on here. How long will we have to wait? Minutes? Oh, it's done. Well, that was not so bad. Anyway, so just open, this is fast because pretty much it doesn't do anything, right? I mean, you don't have to import. Well, that's a strategy for performance. Do as little as possible. So this is very much lazy loading. It only loads what's actually being displayed, so it doesn't load all the glyphs into memory at all. And it's showing things pretty much live. Okay, so this is a much more complex family. In total, there are 4 different italic angles. Yay, there's 2 width classes. Yeah, there's indeed a condensed involved. There's a bunch of weight classes. Okay, there is a monospaced involved. Okay, I will later go to this Glyph Extensions magic thing. We can also see the style name that's sorted at the end. Because I could sort by style name first. And then, of course, we get an alphabetical thing. Well, we can rearrange this into a more sensible, but usually the alphabetical order of your style names is the worst kind of sorting order imaginable. So by default, it will try to move that all the way at the end. We can see the family name. But anyway, we see sort of an overview of the fonts. We can zoom out a little bit. I don't know how much sense it will get a little slower because, of course, it will need to display many more glyphs. We can also zoom in quite a bit. Select things. There's a comma from a light font. Yay. So navigate, arrow keys. Maybe select a bunch of these. We can go through the font like that, or go through the next part of this. So there's a bunch of subfamilies here. So by default now, they're kind of sorted according to those subfamilies, if I see it correctly. I think this first here, yeah, this is the condensed sans. What is this here? This is the normal sans, which has many more weights. Okay, and here we have a bit of, okay, we have some serifs, but there's, okay, we have sans and serif mixed. How did that happen? That's probably because, yeah, maybe we should, like, maybe, I mean, the family name, in this case, kind of gives away a lot. Right now, if I do this, then mono will be first, sans will be second, sans condensed. Okay, let's switch that around. I want first mono, then condensed. Okay, we're still, also, this is still mono. Yes, fixed pitch is true. Continue, here we are suddenly at the sans condensed, sans condensed italic, sans not so condensed, etc. Here's the serif now nicely grouped together. Right, so we see the ranges of weights, but perhaps indeed we want to see all the italics together. Well, then we would, well, we can also, by the way, I didn't show that yet, we can make subsets. If I click on this one, we will only see the non-italics. So now all the italics are hidden, so much smaller family. So if everything is visible, then it's just everything goes, but I can narrow the selection. And by selecting more, I again widen the selection. This has, so if I look at these guys, now I have all the different italic angles. It's all the italics together. What did I really want to do? Well, what do we have here? Okay, I'm learning this application because it's pretty new. So we see some zeros here. Okay, oh, in the monospace they have a dot in here. Okay, so yeah, we can scroll through the family. So 64. Okay, scrolling gets a little tricky now because I zoomed out a bit too much. There's still improvements possible. So now these are, for instance, all the light dollar signs with everything of the same weight. So now we're looking at it grouped for all the lights together, or here all the figures of the one after light, whatever. So ways of looking at existing font data, and well, maybe looking for inconsistencies. It usually happens if I take an existing font family that is a work in progress, and I open it with this app, I usually find an inconsistency like right away, because you have this overview. I mean, it's not complete, maybe you still have to scroll through, but you normally don't see this collection of your work together. So it's pretty easy to find inconsistencies if your tools allow making such inconsistencies. So here, this is not necessarily an inconsistency, but we see, for instance, here, reaching the Cyrillic department, that the condensed don't have Cyrillics yet. What's with that, Paul? No Cyrillics for the condensed? Oh, okay. Work in progress, no? It's I have to pay the rent somehow. So, not inconsistency. Things. It's a large family. You don't do everything at once. So I'm not going to click on the kerning thing here, because the kerning thing is a little tricky. Once I click on the kerning thing, all the kerning of all 64 fonts will be loaded, and that's taking too long. So that's indeed something that I will admit is not working at all properly yet. For a small family, it's nice. Okay, so we've been looking at TTFs, OTFs. I have a separate folder here for the Ibm Plex source. That's just the sans, not the condensed, and not the serif, and not the mono. 2 design space files. Does it eat design space files? It eats design space files. It swallows them whole. So here we're looking pretty much at the masters that are also on the GitHub site for Ibm Plex. You can look at the UFO masters. So it's nice to see. So here we have sorted by, I mean, I can't build interpolations here in any way, but you can see how the UFOs that are attached to this. And actually here I can click on the kerning, and we can see that, there's lots of kerning in here. And you see there's also some gaps, but if you look closely, that often those gaps mean 0. You see here this, if you imagine 0, well, that is nicely interpolated between these two. Well, let's look at these two. Okay, the Cyrillic kerning, that's right. I'm not even reading the class names here. Lots of Cyrillic kerning, lots of non-Cyrillic kerning. Anyway, so those guys have been kerning. There's really, I'm really impressed with the thoroughness and the precision. I mean, it's like I said, I usually find inconsistencies. Plex, not so much. Good work. What did I? So it opens design space files. I wanted to show. Wait, let's do something boring like Adobe Garamond OTF. Robert Slimak's not in the audience, right? Is this? Sorry, it's very nice. All right, so okay, so we're looking at. So what was I going to look? So here there is. It's Glyph Extensions. So there's this magical list here that shows Glyph Extensions. Let me see what was there. I'm looking for. Wait, I actually had another old style. Wait, if I click old style here, so now I get additional columns that represent a certain glyph name extension. So for instance, now here, I only have 4 fonts open, but at one glance, I see the lining figures, the tabular figures, and the old style figures. I don't know offhand like how many kinds of. Okay, let's do something with the small caps. So so here we have columns for the small caps. If we change the order, then we can see like okay, actually only the regular has small caps. So maybe let me see what is with the weights. Okay, let's not look at the italic. So let's just only look at the Roman. There's small caps. And as with earlier Adobe fonts, there are small caps assigned to the caps as well as the lowercase. That is, I understood from Miguel that that's no longer the case anymore. So anyway, but we see what's in here, and let's see what else could be interesting. Well, in terms of numbers, I mean, we can maybe select everything, but that's will give a lot of empty gaps. It's not a okay, there are superior letters, right? That's but the numbers superior. Was there an inf? Right on. Okay, so more numbers. Okay, does this have to do with numbers? No. Numerator, right? Old style. Okay, let's focus on the numbers. Titling. Tab old style. Exactly. Tabular. All right. Well, that's a neat little connection of numbers here that we can look at as a group, and we found them relatively quickly, and we see what other kinds of. Okay, another thing to sort by. Well, here's interesting. There's okay, so we can, for instance, sort by a glyph column, and then it doesn't really sort by anything apart from is this glyph there or not, and we first see the ones that are there. So here, for this particular extension. And I've scrolled this thing out of view, so I don't even know anymore which one it is. Okay, it's the inferior one. Well, this is the full set of inferior glyphs in the font. After this whole column will be empty. Anyway, so things like that. We can look at other kinds of. So within one font, we can even think of like the small caps are perhaps another dimension within the same font, right? We're not even looking at several fonts. So there are dimensions even within one font. You can see that as a design parameter, or as an axis, or as a grouping. So things like that. I was really impressed with Sahara's talk about the thing that I can't think of. Thank you, the Kashid. Thank you, Pablo. I can't remember that, but I talked to her during the break, and because she showed this really nice glyphs screenshot with all the colors, because with Arabic you have all these alternates necessary to construct this flowing writing thing, which is very different, obviously, from our boring Latin things, where the most letters are very isolated things. It has to become this flowing thing. But yeah, to build an Arabic font is quite an effort all by itself. And I saw this you remember this, the colorful screenshot with the colored boxes, right, which is kind of the grouping. And while that looks very pretty, I always keep thinking, like, is that really the best way to sort these things? So I asked her if I could use the source file as a demo. And here we go. This is the source file that she allowed me to use. Thank you so much. And does it eat glyphs files? It eats glyphs files. So here we have, well, okay, now I have to apologize for this area here because it doesn't do anything with features yet, nor right to left. So whatever combination of Arabic letters you will see here will look terrible. Not that I would recognize it. But okay, what we're looking at is this glyphs file, which actually has two masters, and it's named as a width, but it's in fact indeed the Qasida. Right? This is the short one, the long one, and we can go, so for some letters maybe it doesn't exist, but we can kind of see the variants next to each other. Again, apologies, this is not typography, we're just looking at glyph images, right? Don't in any way. So yeah, but if we now look at the glyph extensions, so these are all the extensions that are used within that font. It kind of collects all that, and let's have a look. So we should, let's get the init and the fina and the midi, and let's maybe sort them in a way that is a little bit more. Okay, so we have. Let's go to. I can make this a little smaller again. Yes, 5 minutes. Excellent, almost done. It's amazing. All right, so different variations, and you know there are many more. We're now looking at two ways. Well, maybe we should. So this is the narrow ones, and this would only be the wide ones. But it's a way of looking at those things. Again, this is not text, right? This is well. So you would have a flexible way to organize your work. I mean, sometimes you need to look at things in this order, and sometimes you need to look at it in that order. So there's no fixed hierarchy, is the main point behind it. So that was that little demo. I didn't mean to demo all these things here, but I would love to. Does it eat variable fonts? It eats variable fonts for breakfast. So what do we see here? We see Skia and everything that's in it. Well, there's a whole bunch of empty columns, and it turns out you see there's these funny weight values here. So it gets the axis, it's a two-axis font if you're aware of Skia. And you know, let's scroll. Is there anything there? And aha, the famous Q trick is right here. There's some magic that will not be explainable in 1 minute in Skia going on. A whole bunch of masters condensed. So I think let's sort it. Well, you know, if I would click on the zeros here, I would end up with the neutral. This is the neutral, nothing else. So if I add, I can unclick them to also. So these are the width ones from the neutral. Well, let's add. Let's actually do it like. Well, okay, indeed. If I don't want that Q thing to see. So here we see from narrow and the normal and wide from going from light. But again, we can change the order in which we look at it, right? So now we have the lights going from narrow, regular, wide, and the medium, narrow, regular, wide, etc., etc. Inspecting a variable font. I've been trying to open the variable fonts that Peter van Blokland has been making with his bit count, and it kind of chokes on that because there's so many complex. It's actually very simple, but there's somehow I don't deal with components yet correctly. So and there's lots of components references going on. Okay, 5 minutes. It's too short. Buffalo, well, okay, we can, maybe Buffalo Gal is also a nice thing. Okay, what happened? So maybe zoom in a little bit here, but we can kind of look through this famous from Tom Rickner. Is Tom here? No. He was last year, sorry. This is together with Skia, one of the oldest, the early generation variable fonts, right, from the early 90s. Very fun font. So ideally, I want also some sliders that you can see them live. Doesn't really work. What else does it eat? Color fonts. I have here Bungee, another very nice open source font by David Jonathan Ross. I think made either funded by Google or commissioned by Google even. It has, it's available in several formats. What I can read at this moment is the color CPAL variant of color fonts, which to me is the most interesting variant of color. SVG, well, it's nice, it's SVG, but here with color CPAL fonts, all the layers are actual glyphs, so you could hint them. And each layer could be also a variable glyph. Well, we'll get to that in a second. So yeah, we see a preview here of a color font. There was, okay, which one was it? I think, yeah, this is an emoji font from the Mozilla project. So also an open source, so it's not very large, but well, it's this a color font. We can look at it, yay. And we can actually see, if we scroll through the end, I mean, this is a pretty large font in the sense that it really contains many. But here we actually see how it's built up. Here we see the individual layers, and the glyph names are such, well, we could filter to see that. Let's just scroll through because there's some funny moments. Oh, yeah, the flags are always nice to look at flags. So yeah, each layer here is a glyph, and it's specified what color it has, and it's pretty easy to read, actually, and then you display that. SVG is a little harder because you need to parse SVG, which, anyway, challenges. Now I wanted to go to the multicultural noses, which, well, okay, there's this kind of stuff going on. Yeah, you know, you see, they're. Oh wait, here's okay, no noses. Okay, nothing here. Okay, so empty. So this should be sorted better. And right now I'm. Okay. I probably already skipped the noses, but anyway, there's hands. Oh, I missed it. Here, this is awesome. Right. Okay. Hands. The individual layers. Anyway, how close are the other? Okay. There's the Osho hands. That was not a good thing to say. All right, never mind. There is a very famous variable font made by Roel Nieskens here in the room, which is a variable font and a color font. I cannot animate it here, but I can show that everything is in there. There's the here. It's a variable color font, and in his demo, you can actually slide his top hat. Go up and down, very funny. So this is a very nice test font. It's on GitHub somewhere. I couldn't find it, so I asked him, but it's there. Then there's MyBridge from Lawrence, which he kindly allowed me to use for this demo. This is not an available font, but this is, okay, let me quickly go through. These are the masters in that font, and I just go through them with my arrow keys as the keyframes. There's a combination where he puts the writer on top of it, so we can, with arrow keys, animate it. But yeah, he made a color version, and it's right there. So there's Mr. Color, MyBridge, and well, we could also see a couple together because, you know. Well, and then you have one, so it has color or not. If I select both here, then I have the color one and the non-color one. Well, this is a little glitchy. However, I could sort slightly differently and keep the same selection, and now it will actually, oops, did I already go so far back? So, back and forth. Nice one, black and white, color next to each other. You can zoom in. In the end, so this is where I am roughly. I think I run through the most important demos of this thing. I prepared Eames, not for something specific, but it's a nice font and it has many glyphs and it has alternates. And it's an interesting family because it has some funny things. So where is this going? In the end, it will go here, which currently doesn't do more than this, but work in progress, like I said. So for now, a viewing thing. Hopefully, it will develop a little further to more useful things There was one thing I wanted to say. Right, yeah, okay, one important thing for me, and Eames is the wrong example for that. Let's go back to Plex and just open an arbitrary font here. So that what for me is really important is that it will natively deal with quadratic splines as well, in addition to cubics, so it will read true type curves natively in addition to. Did I forget anything? There's always more, but thank you for hanging in there and staying here. Let's enjoy the beers, which today are sponsored by Glyphs, which is very nice. But I have an important question that was, yeah, it's coming, Irene. Irene was wondering, where is the start point? Anyway, maybe in a couple of years, Type Machine beers, not there yet at all. Let's do it with Glyph beers first. Anyway, thank you very much.